All right, here we go. So thank you everybody for joining us for this session on building Giving Day and crowdfunding features in BBCRM and BBIS. So today's session is Chris is the one who put this together, Chris Kastner, and he's actually over, as you can see there on the screen, over with Blackbaud Pacific, meaning he's over there in the New Zealand area. The Australia area. So obviously he is hopefully still in bed right now, getting ready for his Friday rolling up on him. So he provided this recording, and so I'm going to start this recording. And if you have any questions, you can post it there. And I don't know if anybody from around this team is over or in here that may be able to answer some questions, but if not, we will try to get those forwarded on. So without further ado, I will get this recording, this video playing.
Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining this session. We'll be taking a look into two customizations that were built for the Australian National University. The first of those being a Giving Day function, and the second being a crowdfunding solution to allow for project-based fundraising. Firstly, we'll go through the Giving Day solution. So we'll look at the BBIS and BBCRM separately. So we'll look at how those are both set up for the Giving Day. And we'll also go through the customizations that were required for that, look at how we used some standard parts to actually generate content for the website. We'll go through the crowdfunding solution after that and look at the BBIS functionality, the BBCRM and BBIS customization work for that effort, and also the APIs that were built for that. We'll go through as well, talking about how some website content has been generated using Blackbaud CRM data. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Chris Kastner. I'm the Senior Principal Digital Consultant at Blackbaud Pacific. I'm based out of Melbourne in Australia. Apologies that I'm not going to be able to answer any questions during this session. This is going to be in the middle of my night. So if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I'll also include my email address at the end, but just make a note of that now if you want to contact me about any of this. I've been at Blackbaud for just over 11 years now. Before that was a Blackbaud customer for a total of 14 years, bringing me to 25 years of industry experience with the not-for-profit sector. I focus heavily on UX and UI design, and have a background in marketing and data analytics, as well as more recently focusing a little bit more onto the full stack development, so building the customizations and the front end of those as well. So the Australian National University are one of Australia's top ranked universities. They're based out of Canberra, which is our nation's capital. They went live with Blackbaud CRM back in 2021. BBIS is used extensively now, so that is using quite an advanced alumni portal, and also some email marketing functionality is delivered through BBIS and BBCRM, as well as they use it for almost all of their fundraising. They run an annual Giving Day, so that's to drive donations to a range of different fundraising purposes. They also have not yet started, but we're planning on creating some crowdfunding functionality to allow people to raise money for projects, and also to be able to provide a way where people can support projects that they're interested in. The first project we're going to look at is the Giving Day solution. So this is a range of different BBCRM and BBIS features, some standard functionality and some were customized. Some of the more straightforward things that ANU were after was a landing page with different donation options. Now, clearly, BBIS is geared towards this sort of thing. It has out-of-the-box functionality to be able to do that. And it also has donation forms, which is great. So those integrate directly with Blackbaud CRM. Some of the functionality that was a little sort of missing from our tool set was a donor tally. So the ability to show how much money's been raised for certain things, sort of a progress bar, if you will, and also to provide donor challenges that are configurable. Now, ANU's donor challenge criteria is quite different than the way that the Blackbaud CRM donor challenge functionality exists. So we looked at ways of addressing that as well. ANU took their requirements to market, and they struggled to find a platform that suited their needs. This came down to two different things. No platform provided all of the different things they wanted. So For example, the donation form integration with Blackbaud's CRM. That's obviously quite straightforward with BBIS, but through a third-party platform, that requires either API integration or importing files, which is not a great solution to end up with. The other issue they ran into is that almost all of the platforms that were available for hosting something like a giving day are hosted overseas. And because of their IT policy, they weren't actually able to have data hosted overseas. So that ruled out almost all of the options anyway. We used the designation search part to be able to allow people to see the list of options that are available to donate to and then feed those through to a donation form. We also developed a donor tally REST API using a BBIS custom handler. This allows us to pull out donation counts and the amount that's been given to a particular designation and or appeal, and that's used to surface the donor tally function that they were after. So looking at the web page here, you can see the Giving Day landing page for last year. You'll see along the top we have a total that's been raised, as well as a percentage and the goal that the appeal has. Along the top, you would see a countdown timer if Giving Day was active, or in the lead up to it that tells you how long until it begins. On the page, you'll also find a list of different designations that people can give to. And so these all align with designations in CRM. And the amount that's raised here is the amount that was raised on Giving Day. The way that that's been done is to use an appeal for Giving Day and a designation for each of the funding areas that were being raised that particular year. So you'll see we have a count and amount for each of these showing up. There's also an image and some text that's appearing here. All of this is coming from the designation record, and that's happening through one of the standard parts in BBIS called the Designation Search part. I'll show you how that's been set up to do this, but you can store these images in CRM, and you can store descriptive text on the purpose record, and then you just need to use the public name for the designation to show a nice headline for that. There's also text-based filtering, which lets you just type, and then that will show up all of the different things that are available. This was all just done using a JavaScript plugin, so all of the different options are on the page, and then you can filter through those using text. The tallies we'll get into in a little bit. These are built using a REST API. I'll show you how that's done and talk about how we built that for ANU. So each one of these points to the same donation page. So I'll open up a couple of these in the background and just show you how that works. You'll see down the bottom left, we have the URL and it appends the ID, which is the designation ID. If you're familiar with the donation forms in BBIS, you'll know that you can pass a designation using the ID parameter and the GUID of the designation record. So one of the problems that we had to overcome in this project was that when you make a donation through BBIS, that donation sits in a batch, and it's not until that batch has been committed that you can actually query the amounts using something like the Query API to surface that in BBIS or a data list or anything like that. So in order to summarize the amounts for designations, we wanted that to be more live than what the batch processing would allow. So what we ended up doing was building a BBIS custom handler to overcome this issue. So next up, I'm going to show you how to create the custom handler that we're using for the REST API. When you create a new solution or a new project in Visual Studio, you want to select an empty web application. So that is using the .NET framework. You can opt to do that either with C#, which is what I prefer, or with Visual Basic. It doesn't really matter. There's really sort of three main things that you need to do in order to set that up. The first of which is to firstly include a reference to BBNC extensions, which is a DLL that is included as part of the SDK. You'll also find it if you have a local installation of BBIS, it's sitting in the netcommunity/bin folder. So that's BBNC extensions.dll. The other thing that you need to do is create your C# or VB code to actually create the class for your handler. So you'll have essentially a namespace and then a class which is going to be the endpoint that you need to call. I'll show you how to access that later. But for example, in this one, we'll have donation tally.appeal, and that's how we access this particular handler for this class. You'll notice there's a range of different ones in here, so we can use multiple different endpoints on one DLL. So we'll basically deploy this once, and we'll have all of these different endpoints available. Within that, each of these need to inherit the custom handler base. Now that is part of, as you can see, BBNC extensions library, and it's under the custom handlers node, if you will. There's one thing within that you need to override, and that is the process request function, which is a void function or a sub, I think it is in Visual Basic. That has one parameter, which is the HTTP context, and that is essentially all you need to use in order to do the request and the response for your code. So in this case, you'll notice there's a couple of ways I've done this I'll talk through, but basically we can access things from the request URL. So we can, for example, get the appeal parameter, handle all of that functionality however you want, and then at the end, effectively, you just need to return that response. So one other thing that I've done in this project is to keep all of the SQL code separated out from this custom handler. So that's actually as part of the same solution as you may see up here, which is our custom fx.donation tally. This is a Blackbaud CRM customization. So this is one of the DLLs that you have to load through the vroot bin custom folder. So these effectively have all of the stored procedures in them for handling each of these endpoints. So you'll see here we have, for example, the donation tally appeal here. And this takes a parameter of appeal and include unpaid pledges. You'll notice on here, we're passing in both of those parameters, including the GUID that we have from the URL and also the flag as to whether or not to include unpaid pledges. The other thing that this does is allow us to make changes to the logic without having to redeploy the BBIS customization. So once this BBIS customization is in place, if we want to make changes to, for example, the logic that's behind one of these stored procedures, we can do that directly by deploying a customization only to the database Blackbaud CRM, and that's a little bit easier to manage. When you're creating stored procedures like that through a catalog file within CRM, there's one important thing to note, and that is the grant permission to database roles. Depending on if you're self-hosted, this probably won't be an issue because you may just be able to provide your BBIS application access to the CRM database anyway. But most of our hosted customers through Azure would actually find a lot of the tables inaccessible for BBIS unless you specifically grant the BB Portal web role, which is the default role used for the BBIS application through IIS. So let's talk a little bit now about the custom handler in the donation tallies that we've built for ANU. So what we have effectively are three different donation tallies, one based on an appeal, one based on a designation, and one that uses both of those. And so the reason for that is we wanted to be able to surface an overall appeal goal with the tally. We also wanted to then be able to reuse designations for different appeals. For example, the same designations across multiple giving days without having to create separate designations. And so this allows us to create a filter that includes both of those. And then we have just a basic designation one as well. A few things you'll note in here is that we're able to select two different things here. So one of those is we have a list of donations that have been committed. So these are ones that actually exist in the database. And then we have a list of donations that are actually in the temporary donation transactions table. One important thing to include if you're looking to do this is to include the XML namespace that is within that XML data. So if you include that namespace, then your SQL code will be able to read the data. One thing I sort of ran into during this project was that any XML data that was stored as UTF-16 could be stored in the database, and the table allowed it, and BBIS worked. However, the XML encoding, so the envelope that's on the XML data, specifies that it's UTF-8. And so when you try and read that with SQL, it fails if there are any UTF-16 characters in there. So for example, if someone includes a special character in one of their name or address fields, that will break the XML reading. So you'll end up essentially crashing this stored procedure, and you would have no data on the website for your donor tally. So in order to use that handler that we've just created, you'll notice that the /component/custom.ashx handler equals is on the root domain of BBIS site. So wherever you have your BBIS homepage, you should have access to access those handlers using this URL extension highlighted here. Then all you need to do is put the namespace in. So in this case, donation tally dot, and then our handler. So I'm just going to show you using the appeal designation handler, which takes both parameters for an appeal and a designation. So then what we want to do is pass in those parameters. So we'll have appeal equals, and we'll have designation equals. For the appeal, I'm just going to copy and paste the appeal ID. So that is for the giving day for 2022. And I'm going to grab one of the designations. So I think this is the Canterbury Scholars Fund, which is the first one that appears on the page. You'll see when I load that, that's almost instantaneous. We pull across the count and the total and also the goal. So that goal is for the appeal. So that allows us to basically pull all the information that we need to be able to generate the progress bar for this particular page. So just to recap, the three things that you really need to do when you're creating your class is to firstly inherit that BBNC extensions DLL file. Secondly, you need to inherit the class custom handler base. So that is part of the BBNC extensions.dll. And the other thing that you need to do is to override that process request function. That's essentially all you need to do to create the custom handler itself. And then it's just a matter of calling that function when you need to access it. There's some information on the Blackbaud Internet Solutions developer guide that does provide a little bit more information about this. But I think once you get your hands on it and you start playing around with it, it's quite easy to get the hang of and to do some really cool stuff with it. I'll show you during the crowdfunding one as well how we were actually able to get this to return an image. And I have also done this so that it can access files or access only things that are related to someone who's logged in. There's a whole range of different things that you can do that leverage some of the power of the integration between the two systems. Now, before we wrap up the Giving Day section of the presentation, let's have a little look at how the page was set up. So I just wanted to show you briefly, there's nothing too crazy here. I guess the only thing that's really driving most of this is the designation search part. So this is what you see where you see the grid of items. You'll see we're actually just outputting all of them up to 50 based on a query of designations that have been selected for Giving Day. The output here just includes the designation merge fields. So the merge fields that are available for the thumbnail, the designation public name, and the purpose description. And all we have to do is create a link to the donation form that we want to use. And this designation search part automatically includes the ID that points to that designation into that URL. So for each result, it'll automatically link to the right one. There's, I guess, the other thing to think about is the tallies and how we access those through script here. So we have the Giving Day customization script. And this has, as you can see, the AJAX calls that are happening that actually query the designations. And so that happens through just a basic AJAX call. We're setting the cache to false through here as well so that it appends a unique identifier each time that call's made, just so that those values are updated. So when someone makes a donation, that will show up straight away and they don't end up with a sort of cached version of that result. So that's pretty much it for the Giving Day function. Hopefully that was useful. Now let's take a look at the next section, which is the crowdfunding solution. So this next section is going to be looking at the crowdfunding functionality that we built for ANU. So this hasn't gone live yet. So this is a bit of a sneak peek in terms of what will be launched later on in this year. So let's take a look at the requirements first up. So in terms of a crowdfunding solution, ANU wanted, basically similar to the Giving Day, a landing page that showed a range of different projects that people can give to. They also wanted a page where people can make donations, so similar to Giving Day, but also be able to show some things on there, for example, that are a bit more tailored towards the project in terms of like a custom banner image and also a donor feed showing all the people that have given to that project. And they also wanted to show the progress bars and tallies and things like that. They wanted to provide a way of applying to submit a project. What we ended up building was some BBIS content that was generated from a range of data that was stored in CRM. So that was using things like queries and data lists to actually surface information onto the web page that's dynamic and based on what someone's selected. We extended the REST APIs, so the ones that we just had a look at before for Giving Day. These are extended to be able to pull images based on attachments from crowdfunding records, as well as listing donors, so a donor feed, if you will, and also to be able to extend the totals, so that donor tally that we saw before, to be able to link it to a designation record. So what we have next is a custom interaction form that we built for one of our customers a few years ago that we're using for this project to be able to allow someone to fill in a form to basically apply for a project to be added to the list. There's some functionality that hasn't been built yet that I just wanted to call out now. So this, at the moment, is not so much a peer-to-peer fundraising solution as it is a crowdfunding solution. And by crowdfunding, it's really a donation portal. It's not a promise to make a donation, and then once you reach your goal, we're going to deduct money from everyone. It's I will donate to this project, and this project has a goal. It's sort of more along the lines of the Giving Day style funding. So what we've created for ANU is a whole catalog of crowdfunding functionality. And so that you'll find that here under fundraising. And there's a section under this for crowdfunding specifically. You'll see there's different data lists showing up down the bottom, and these allow us to see any projects that haven't been approved yet, any projects that are active and featured, as well as any that are not featured that are active. So let's say we want to add a new project to the crowdfunding landing page. What we need to do first is just obviously click add a project here. I'm going to go and create one just for the purposes of this demo. So I'm going to call it maybe demo project. And I'm just going to paste in the description that we had on the blurb for this session. Here, we can specify unique ask amounts that are shown on the donation form. So we can have, for example, 75, 150, 500, 1,000. And I'm going to leave the rest of that as is. The other thing that we can do is provide an image. So this is what would be used as a banner image. So I can select, for example, this banner image here. Now, you'll see we have a couple of things showing up on the page. First up, we have the ability to edit that project, obviously, delete it, and specify a vanity URL. So I'll talk about that in a second. The other things you'll notice, we get a progress bar that shows us how we're going. The other things that we've got in here are the list of donors. So this is a custom data list. This includes pending transactions. So similar to the donor tally that we saw before, this data list actually looks at those pending transactions and includes them in here. And also if they want to remain anonymous. So there is an option for that. So where we have a donor feed showing up on the page, you can opt out of that, as we'll see later. These link to a designation record. There is a one-to-one mapping of crowdfunding project to designation. So basically, every crowdfunding project needs a designation, and you can only have one linked to each one. So that's how we're using the donation form to actually surface the different funding options. There's not really another way of linking a donation through a donation form to something like a custom record, but we're doing it using a designation. So each project needs to have its own designation, and that is something the organization wasn't sure about at first, but I think we talked them around in the end. The vanity URLs, I'll just touch on those before I forget. Those are set up through the settings section here. We can specify the donation page URL to use. So once we've set our donation page for crowdfunding, so each landing page uses the same donation page. We can specify which site this is using. So you can have multiple different BBIS sites. This tells us which site to use for that. The other thing that we then need to use is a URL prefix. And so we'll see that this crowdfunding prefix appears in the friendly URL that's generated for each project. So let's go and set a vanity URL. And you'll see it defaults to one here. So it's going to call this one BB Dev Days demo project. We can change that if we want. You'll see it updates the URL that would be used for that. And then whenever we save that, that's going to actually write a vanity URL into the table in BBIS. Those then allow us to share that URL. So that URL then points effectively to the donation page link. So let's jump in and have a look at the front end. So first up, as you remember, we have a landing page. So that landing page will include all of the projects that are available to make a donation towards. At the moment, there might be about 7 or 8. So at the moment, there's no paging or anything like that. We'll just see them all down here. One of the cool things about this page is it has a donor feed. And so this donor feed is a new API endpoint we added to the donor tally. And it returns, for example, the designation they gave to slash the name of the project, the amount they gave, and the name. It does also support the anonymous donor. So when you tick the anonymous gift donation option on the donation form, this replaces their name with that through the API. So instead of using the designation search part, this uses the query results display part. So the fields that we have here for the query basically are being pulled from an ad hoc query that we created in CRM. I'll show you how we output the fields relating to the crowdfunding project when we get to the back end of things. But you'll notice we have everything here. So we've got all of the details showing up. So for example, our BB Dev Days demo project that I just created is showing up here now. We have the progress bar, how long left, how many people have given to it, and that's showing up for every single one of these. So there's a lot of information showing up. We can get to a project to donate to it, as you can see from any of the links up the top, or you can just click on one here. So let's have a look at our crowdfunding project that we've just created. We have the progress bar showing up here, including the donation details that are pulled from the API. So we have how much has been raised as well as the target. We also have the list of donors, and those are showing up here. Let's go ahead and make a donation to this, and I'll show you how that works and how that shows up. I'm just going to put a different name in. Sorry, I can't copy and paste that. So I'm just making a $75 donation. So we should see this amount changes from, as you can see, instantly. So I'll just give it a second to update again. So that amount is pulled from the REST API. Initially, it's pulled from a query. So it does it instantly when the page loads. But then we use the REST API to update it on a schedule. And so it's constantly polling for updates to this sort of every 15 seconds or so. I'll talk about how that works when we look at the APIs. We've got the donors. So this appeared straight away, and that's really nice. The other place that will show up now is on the landing page. So the landing page should also have that latest donation appearing there. So the other thing that we have on the landing page and also on each project page is a promotion to submit a project. And so part of this crowdfunding solution is to allow people to raise money for their own project if they want to. And so we've created this application form. I'll show you how this is set up really quickly. I'm not going to get into this too much because it's a separate customization from the crowdfunding and giving day functionality, but this allows us to create a form. This uses code tables from CRM and a range of different conditional fields that can show and hide as you go through the form. So we can put in like my new projects and a summary, and we want to raise $50,000, and it allows us to capture that information through a form that then will write an interaction record to a constituent for later approval, and all that information gets tagged on that interaction record. And the landing page itself, you can see there's not a lot of content on here. We have a banner image, we've got effectively just content showing up here. The only thing that's really showing any content on here is the query results display part. Now, as I said before, this is a way of pulling information onto a web page by looping through results from a query. Through this, we're looping through all of the crowdfunding projects and outputting that information onto a page. Some really cool stuff you can do with this. When you have a specific record type through here, you can access any data list or view that relates to that record type. And so we have our custom view data form showing here, which has in it some really cool stuff, including the URLs, the amount raised, the goals, if it's active, categories, effectively everything we need to be able to show on the front end. I will point out that although we can include a thumbnail here, you can't actually render an image using this. This does work for the designation display part, where you have an image attached to a designation record on the web tab. However, the thumbnail that's generated for this isn't an image, so you can't actually use that. So for the donation landing page, which is the crowdfunding project page, there's quite a few customizations around the donation form. I'm not going to get into those today, but what we do have is the crowdfunding details. And so the crowdfunding project merge data that we have on here, if you remember from before, we're passing the ID, which is a GUID of the designation, into the donation page. So what we have to do is use that designation record, and we have a designation crowdfunding project view form. So this uses the designation that is linked to a crowdfunding project to access those same fields that we saw on the landing page. So there's a couple of important scripts that are going on here that relate to the donor feed. So we have some similar code to what you will have seen earlier that is using an endpoint for crowdfunding donors. This is pulling out new donors that appear on the web page. And there's a couple of parameters here, including how many to return and also a time value. So this allows us to filter based on when it was last polled. So the other couple of things here that I want to show you are the crowdfunding donation customization. This has in it some features that I wanted to talk about on the front end to get the image itself. And so there is a request here for the crowdfunding image. You'll see here, I might just zoom that in a little bit. There is a request going here to get the campaign banner. So let's talk now about the REST APIs that we built. So we've got a couple of different REST API extensions for crowdfunding that we built. First up, we wanted to have a live donor feed. So to actually show who's giving to which projects. The other thing that we've built is the image handler. And so to be able to return an image via that REST API to pull out CRM attachments and show them as images to the person viewing the web page. So jumping back into the code. So first up, we have the crowdfunding donors. So this code here, I'm not going to get too far into it, but has a handful of stuff in it that deals with the conversion of dates, and also the sorting and grouping of the both committed and uncommitted temporary transactions that are sitting in the donation transactions table. And the other one I want to talk about is the crowdfunding image. So this one is a lot more straightforward. This returns the image thumbnail, and the date changed from the crowdfunding project. I'll talk about why we're getting date changed in a second. See if you can work it out in the interim. So this crowdfunding donors tally, this is actually a donor feed. This is showing names and details of people that have made donations. You can see the information we're returning from that stored procedure is the amount, the crowdfunding ID, the donor's name, a link, which is the URL to link to the donation page, the project name itself, and also how long ago it was. And that's just a string that's returned. The rest of this code essentially goes through and then returns a collection of results, and we're then converting that into JSON. So this is a little bit of a better way than that string creation that I did before, but in the end, we're essentially just writing that value as JSON as the response. For this one, we have a very similar handler equals donation tally.cf donors equals, and then the n equals 5, so that's how many to return, and then the timestamp here. I'm just going to take that off. And when we run this, we should get the 5 most recent donors. So you can see we're getting 5 from that. So the image endpoint that we have here on the donation tally DLL, that has in it a range of things. So first up is the crowdfunding ID. And then we have 2 parameters that are optionally set, which are the width and the height. There is a range of features which we've accessed from the UI modeling core library, which is part of the SDK. That allows us to actually leverage some binary field data and convert that into an image. So there's actually these endpoints here which you can use to actually return an image. So we actually use the attachment date changed to set the last modifier of the image. And so that way the browser will know if the image has been changed or not based on the actual time that it's been changed in CRM, which is really cool. Aside from that, we're then using the response to create the image value. And then if that's all successful, what we end up with is a response type of a JPEG image. That could actually be any image format. It actually doesn't really matter. You could use PNG or GIF or anything like that, and it would be fine. And then we write that image through here. So let's have a look at how that works on the request. CF image, and there's one here from before that I have, so I'll just open that. And that has in it, as you can see, the crowdfunding ID. It also has a parameter here for the width. So if we want a smaller image for a thumbnail, we can set that to 200. And that's actually a 200 pixel image. It's not resized. It is actually just an image of that size. You'll see if we look at the network inspector, this is an 8 kilobyte file. So it's not transferring a lot of data that it doesn't need. If we change that to 2000, we've got a 200 kilobyte file instead. So you'll see we just end up with a URL there. We can put that in an image tag, and the image will be rendered on the website, which is awesome. Right, so in wrapping up, let's have a little talk about the things that went well and things that were probably some learnings and things that we have to adjust, I guess, moving forward. So one of the things that we found is that XML parsing in SQL is really slow in terms of if you have a lot of temporary transactions in your donation batches that haven't been processed, it can really start to slow the system. The way that we have to convert the UTF format is an added level. So hopefully we can get that one resolved at a product level. The other issue is that because we're reading XML each time, it may actually be sensible for us to, the first time that happens, write it into a custom table and use that for our donor feed and donor tally. That's something I'm thinking about for, I guess, the next version of both of these, in terms of not having to make it read the CRM system every single time that it is doing it. So each request from each donor landing on the donation page, it's not having to do that XML parsing for each one of them. So in terms of the success, as I said before, crowdfunding has not launched yet, so we don't know the success of it. ANU's first giving day that they did in BBIS using that landing page at the start, so they ended up raising $126,000. Now that is out of their initial goal of $75,000, giving them a total of 168% of their goal. So that exceeded their expectations by quite a lot. They ended up stretching the goal and it beat that as well. In 2022, they raised $174,000. So that's 124% of their $140,000 goal. Again, beating their target by quite a margin. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into how some of this has been set up. I'm definitely happy to respond to any questions that you have, or if anyone needs some further information about how you might go about building some of this stuff, please feel free to reach out. I'm unfortunately, as I said before, asleep right now, so I can't answer your questions live in the chat. So that wraps it up for today. Thanks again for coming, and hopefully see you all at some point in the future. Thanks.